nothing wrong with that. Howdy, howdy. To those of you who are watching already, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to the main screen. Let's do that right now, and bam! Okay, here we go. Starting things off, and yeah, so it's Black Friday, obviously. For those of you just joining in, you're probably, if you're on a vacation, with family or something like that, maybe you're not at home, but for those of you who are, did you buy anything today, or was it kind of like, I'm taking the anti-consumerism route today, and I'm not going to go out and buy something, even though it's incredibly tempting? Or was there just nothing out there that tempted you? I'm curious. I've heard all things from all people, but I'm curious to know what you think. So go ahead and weigh in. Let me know what your particular Black Friday looked like. Or, if you worked on it, then I guess there's that. But what did you do with the time? Dane's Deflated Pool, not buying anything this year, totally broke. Yeah, no, I can definitely see that message relayed between people as well. Sometimes the whole not buying thing isn't so much a conscious effort not to buy something, but more so a lack of funds and a lack of ability to get anything for fear of repercussions down the line, which is smart, not to put yourself in debt and do that kind of thing. Obviously, not recommending anybody do that. I'm just curious to see from everybody how you approach today, or if you treated it like any other day. Like, did it really matter? Because in my shoes, I personally, now I think of it, I didn't really purchase anything that was specifically a Black Friday special. I did get a call from Anthony, coworker Anthony, earlier this morning telling me about some awesome deals he saw over at Home Depot for his favorite, Milwaukee power tools. And in my case, I was trying to think, well, I don't use them as often as he does. He's usually doing various car projects in the garage, whereas now I've kind of reduced the number of cars I'm dealing with, and yeah, no, I've taken the effort down significantly from where it had been prior. But as far as doing the work on my own cars, it depends. Dame bought his Black Friday Ford Flex. I guess if you want to look at it that way, you could. However, I did buy it like a week ago now, so yeah, I mean that part happened on like Saturday, Sunday, so it's a little separate from today. But anyway, throwing it out there, those of you who did take advantage of some Black Friday sales and did get something, feel free to share with everybody what you got, where you got it, and if there's a chance for somebody else to also take an advantage of that, feel free to share it in the comments, the chat. I know there's always somebody who missed out on something and they're happy to get a heads up. So at this late time, it is 7:20 p.m. here in Boise, Idaho. Not knowing the time where you're at, it could be a little later, could be a little earlier, but it's not that far off. There's still a decent chunk of time left today if somebody were to make a sudden change of heart and go out and get something because they saw a sale and they went, oh, actually, I do need that. So leaving it out there just in case you missed out. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off here. Let's turn. Okay, I just put out my post telling people to come to the stream here. We'll see if anybody shows up. If they don't, that's okay. We'll find a way to make it work. Yeah. Turning over the music now. Get a little water so I don't hack my lungs out. Obviously, my day job doesn't require me to tell you about the sales going on there, but I suspect many of you found me by way of auto detailing, car related kind of stuff. So maybe you like taking care of your stuff. And I feel I would be out of line if I didn't at least mention to you what's going on at my day job as far as a sale goes. So if you want to take a look, let me go ahead and pull it up here just so people can see. I will grab the video that I am thinking of here now. Let's go ahead and that page. Okay. You type in the right company, Black Friday. Oh, there we go. Ensure I don't have any videos suddenly playing in the background. Don't want that. Okay. All are paused. Good. Don't mind me just doing a little back-end editing. Yeah, so ahead and mute that site there. Okay, before I hit play on this, and I'll bring it up on screen, obviously, so you can see it. We had a few different fun media things we did in myself, Anthony, Levi, Gabe's kind of neck of the woods for stuff in my day job. It was fun. We had some different ideas of ways to promote sales and stuff like that, but, you know, there are a few fun approaches they took. Hung Rhino, Super Foam, GSF, Gentle Snow Foam, 5 liter, Rags to Riches 1 gallon, and 2 liters of Stjarnagloss Snow had to take advantage of the 20% off at TRC. Yes, so that's definitely one way people were taking advantage. Stjarnagloss in particular, I know some people are seeing like, oh my god, they're marking that stuff down. Are they getting rid of it? No, they're not getting rid of it. They're marking it down because it's actually, they want to make sure it's getting into people's hands to try it. And then once people try it, it's pretty much a done deal. They're going to want to get more. So that part's kind of sell. But let me unmute that. Okay, here we go. Kicking over to React View. This one, I was proud of Levi for embracing his inner Billy Mays. If you don't know who that is, well, you're very, very young or very naive.
Hey guys, Levi for the Rag Company, and this Black Friday Cyber Monday sale, have we got a deal for you? That's right, 20% off almost everything in the store, and doorbusters!
Blow out the mic.
Ultra clay bars at $4 each. Carbon drill brush, $3 each.
The basic joke here was they had him list off like virtually everything. He didn't need to do that, but they're just like, no, just keep going. It gets funnier the more obnoxiously long it gets.
All colors, 50% off. 1616 premium all.
And then I walk into the shot on one of these, but there's like a % off sign in my face.
50% off. All sizes and colors of silver infused microfiber cleaning towels, 50% off. Gauntlet drying towels, all sizes, 40% off. Ultra clay towels and ultra clay mitts
Credit to Glenn who made this one.
$24 each. All Stjarnagloss detailing products, 40% off. Select Color Lock leather products, 40% off. IKHC
Use the elephant leather on my flex. Awesome.
Off. Double Twistless drying towel 2-pack.
Leather that's feeling a little tired really benefits.
Spectrum Dark Packs, 40%
Hey, there I am.
Red, Gray, Black Combo 1616 All-Purpose Terry Towels, 40% off. 1616 Gray Terries, 40% off.
It just keeps going.
All this and more only at theragcompany.com.
All doorbusters limited to supplies on hand. Excludes wholesale full case purchases. No coupon stacking allowed. 20% off sale limited to supplies on hand. No rain check. Standard exclusions apply. Check verbiage for more information.
I kept telling Glenn, though, she had to change that eagle sound effect at the end because I didn't mind having animal effects in there because, yes, they are funny, but the eagle sounded so, like, synthetic and digital and not authentic. It's because she put the filter on it that was the same thing filtering his voice to sound all VHS-y. It just took away any of the actual friggin' bird sound of that eagle, which to me was like, come on, but it's a little thing. I realize I nitpick. Anyway, there was another fun thing we did over on, let's say it was, oh, was it an Instagram reel? I'm thinking it was an Instagram reel. Yeah, here we go. That's not mute.
What the hell? Why is it so dark in here?
Oh, Levi, you haven't heard? It's Black Friday.
20% off almost everything.
And incredible doorbusters. You don't want to miss.
Savings. Savings. Savings.
Where'd Nick go from?
Savings. Savings.
Only at theragcompany.com.
Why is it so dark in here?
Dane, haven't you heard? It's Black Friday.
20%
loops,
off.
but it changes each time it
almost
loops, so it's not
everything.
quite a perfect loop
And
on purpose.
incredible doorbusters. You don't want to miss.
Too much fun.
Savings.
Hey, Mud Hatter.
Savings. Savings.
It's so loud.
Savings. Savings.
Only at theragcompany.com.
Yeah, we had fun with those. Anyway, that was a good time. No, great job. That was Anthony's idea, but Glenn and Anthony Blaine helped to make that one succeed. So shout out to those guys as well. And Hung Rhino, thanks for the bravo on the video. Love the music, especially. Yes, once again, that was Glenn's work. So kudos to her for doing that one. Now I'm going to go ahead and move things along here to a few different things. I had some different stuff that I was going to pick through. I just felt suddenly compelled, I think because the finale was this last week, but to talk about Star Wars ANDOR. That show, well, it's good. It's actually good. There's been a lot of crap, like a lot of just mid, even if stuff has like moments in their other shows, it's all been pretty mediocre. Like Obi-Wan was mediocre, in my opinion. Book of Boba Fett was mediocre, in my opinion. Then The Mandalorian showed up in it, which made it basically like an extra season of The Mandalorian in some ways. But it was still like, it improved it, but it was by no means great. Some people might argue, I guess my standards for what's like decent, good, great, perfect, like rarely is anything ever perfect. There's always, everybody approaches this stuff from different angles. But for me, I can look at things that are very, very different, like thematically. Like I can watch a super big popcorn, dumb action movie, but it's well executed. I will say that's a good movie. And I can watch a very serious, well-written, well-crafted drama with intricate storylines and all this stuff, and I can say that is a good movie. They're both capable of being good movies in my mind, in my opinion. And the same goes for TV shows. But there's even room for like, yeah, the schlockier stuff. Like if it's well executed at what it's trying to do. I don't look and go, oh, that movie's boring, therefore I hate it, which I think I see some people do. Like they just have no appreciation for like slow burn kind of storytelling or content. And then they go, this show sucks because, or this movie sucks because it doesn't get to the point fast enough. I don't see things blowing up or action or whatever. Therefore, this just bums me out and I don't care and I'm bored and I want to watch something else. That's fine, but I like it when people leave reviews where they say that, because then I go, oh, well, they're just wired differently than me, so I'm probably not going to approach it in the same way they did, so maybe I'll enjoy it for the reasons they said they didn't enjoy it. It's just one of those things. Each of us are wired a little differently, but for me, that's an important part. And the whole reason I'm saying this is because, in my opinion, Andor, the show, the Star Wars show, is such a good show. Just beyond any Star Wars-ness of it at all. Just ignoring that property entirely. It's just a good show, standalone as its own thing, that, in my humble opinion, it is the best Star Wars property to come out since the original trilogy. It's that good. And yes, the originals have their flaws, and yeah, they're classics now, which helps some people overlook some of the things about them that are kind of, but they're classics. But this storytelling as a show is just so good. I like Rogue One. I think that's kind of an important determining factor for people if you're gonna enjoy Andor. Is like, did you like Rogue One, and did you like the other Star Wars movies that came out or the other shows that came out? Because those are very different from each other. Like the new trilogy, all that kind of stuff is a very different animal from what Rogue One is. And Andor as a TV show is very different from Obi-Wan or Book of Boba Fett or even Mandalorian, which I know there's a lot of people out there who like The Mandalorian, and that's fine. I enjoyed The Mandalorian for what it was too. I found it enjoyable. But as far as like, I guess more grown-up adult viewing, like feeling like more mature themes, more careful writing, more slow burn plot, more stretched out kind of things that aren't stretched to just like pad a runtime, but actually stretched out so you can kind of like explore the nuance of character and that kind of stuff. Andor is so good at it. I mean, I literally saw somebody compare it to The Wire, which is crazy. If you've ever watched The Wire, that show is amazing. But I mean, that's pretty high bar. But is it going to be the same for everybody? No, I don't think so. But I think compared to the other Star Wars shows that are out there, it is so many levels above that other stuff. And like even Mandalorian, for all its enjoyable qualities, good things, it's a little more hokey, but it's still kind of fun. Andor is like not totally deadly serious. It's not like dry, boring, deadly serious, but it takes itself more seriously than some of the other shows out there that are also on Disney Plus, and it just does it in a way that's so much more compelling to watch, just for me at least. So yeah, I'm gonna watch some stuff that praises it. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So Thomas Flight, this is where today I'm getting a little deeper into some of my nerdy stuff that's not necessarily just car stuff, isn't even remotely detailing stuff. I'll have some of that today too, so don't worry, I'll touch on those. But I'm going to get into a little bit of filmmaker stuff, a little bit of behind the scenes, more dry stuff. So if you're not really looking for that, sorry, you can check out my stream on other days where maybe I'm just streaming a video game or doing something else. But to start off here, I am going to watch a channel that right up front is not necessarily going to be everybody's cup of tea. But the channel's name is Thomas Flight. He has about 650,000 subscribers. And he just does like, film analysis, TV show analysis. And I know there's some people out there who are immediately going to go, oh God, this is going to be pretentious. This really isn't that though. Some of his other stuff can be, sure. But in this case, this is more about like one of the reasons I enjoyed Andor so much had to do with like the locations and the set design and that kind of stuff. It definitely felt more real, more lived in, all that kind of thing. So this little video here, without spoiling anything for anybody, is just kind of going to give you a taste of like, here's what you're getting into. And Dane, nice to see you there. Evening, Dane. Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. It looks like that's your first time chatting, so appreciate you chiming in. Feel free to tell me how your Black Friday went, if in fact you did participate. If you didn't, you can say that too. Otherwise, we're going to watch a little video here, why Andor feels so real. And of course, if you got questions for me, throw them in the chat. I'm happy to take you up on them, and when I get to a spot I can pause, I will do that. But yeah, let's get started.
A couple days ago, I was watching this scene in Andor.
Daniel Mao. Okay, good to see you.
And the first thing that crosses my mind is, I recognize that. Not in a, oh, I've seen that in another show or film before, but in a, I've been there kind of way. And then I immediately thought, no, that's crazy. Obviously, I haven't been there. This is clearly a fake location. But then it cut to the next shot, which just further confirmed my feeling. Look at this footage I shot in London over the summer at a place called the Barbican Center. I don't have any shots that line up exactly with the shots from Andor, but you can tell based on certain design features and elements that this is the real location where they shot this Coruscant scene for Andor. Obviously, the version in the show is heavily modified and
all
extended
the
with
in the
the
show
effects,
are good, but
I
the
think
Coruscant
this
stuff
approach
is like
of grounding the visual effects in Andor within real-world physicality and locations plays a big role in why the show feels so real and lived in. Andor is 100% my favorite post-Disney Star Wars piece of media so far.
Agreed.
Kind of low-key a Star Wars fan. I always thought the world was cool and the original trilogy are undeniable classics, but I honestly stopped watching a lot of the newer Disney stuff because it just wasn't meeting the standards of storytelling that I find enjoyable for a lot of the stuff I like to spend time watching.
Agree on
Most
all
of it
this.
feels like an executive or producer was looking for something to make that would be successful and then trying to make that rather than telling a story in the Star Wars world because they had an actually interesting or compelling story to tell. But I think Andor is great. To me, it's everything I wanted from a Star Wars reboot. It doesn't just rehash things we've already seen or try to go bigger and better. Instead, it
And there's
explores
almost zero
this
familiar
interesting
characters,
world
which
and
is
story
awesome,
from a
actually.
completely fresh perspective. I want to dig
It
into
doesn't rely
why
on, like,
I've
cheap
been enjoying
gimmicks
the
to
show
really
so
get
much,
you to watch
why
it.
I think it
You
feels
just
so
enjoy it
real,
because you
and
get
I'll
to
keep
know
the
the
video
characters.
spoiler free so you can watch it no matter how much of the show you've seen. Let's compare the opening of two different Star Wars shows. In the Obi-Wan show, see how this shot starts on the wide of the VFX and then pulls back to include the parts of the scene that are real. To me, it looks kind of strange and fake. This whole sequence feels off, down to the weird camera shake that it looks like they're adding in post.
I found that pretty annoying.
Now compare
personally.
that to the opening of ANDOR. What are the big differences here? There are 3 different techniques being used kind of all together in this opening that show up throughout the show that I want to highlight. The first element is the priority given to the real elements of the scene. ANDOR first establishes the very tangible physical elements of the scene. The light, rain, and movement from the point of view available to a human, and then it transitions into showing the VFX elements that are added in post in the background. I think doing things this way makes the VFX feel a lot more cohesive for some reason. We see the real stuff, which we can kind of intuitively know is real, and then within that context, the VFX stuff feels like a part of that reality. Go in the other direction, and when we see the VFX stuff, we kind of know subconsciously that it's fake. And then we have this sense that the real stuff is just existing within the fake stuff, which feels much less cohesive to me. The second technique is to focus on sensory details.
Charges. Loitering at the scene of a crime, walking an unleashed massive animal fouling.
This helps ground the visual effects, but it's also just a part of good.
That was another thing in the show, just once again allowing me to nerd out a little bit here. Sorry, this is going to be that kind of stream today, just because I'm still so hyped and excited from having watched the last episode of Andor last night. Yeah, it's just fresh on the brain, but man, I really, really, really enjoyed that show. Yeah, there's information in there that you definitely enjoy it more if you understand a little bit more about the Star Wars universe, but I feel like it's a show that could work for a lot of people, even barring them having ever seen any other Star Wars content. Maybe you watch Rogue One and then you watch that, but I don't know. It could help you. I think it would, but whether you're willing to put in that investment or not, I think on its own, it's a compelling enough character-driven story that you would give it a chance if you found you like the visual style or you like one of the characters or something like that, personality-wise, that stuff. If something hooks you, you'll probably watch the show all the way through. But the thing that was really cool about the show is that it took place in kind of like these 2 or 3 episode chunks, and then the whole setting, the whole like location, all that stuff, the circumstances, the stakes, everything kind of shifts as you go along through the story. It doesn't just stay in one setup the whole way through. It's just the way it moves from one kind of big block to another. If you watch it, you'll get what I'm saying, but it definitely feels super meaningful, super lived in. The details are all there, and I really love that, especially in this show, they kind of harken back to that original series, kind of like cheap, grungy 70s futurism kind of aesthetic, where like a lot of the details, it's like natural extensions of what you saw in the original series, whereas some of the stuff in the other movies feels a little less like that. It just kind of feels like, oh, what's some fantastical newfangled thing we could put in a world that we haven't seen yet? Okay, it'll look like this. But in this show, it all feels very, very grounded and very realistic in a way that you put more stock in the things that are happening on screen. You take more time, you pay more attention, you appreciate it more, because everything just feels that much more real. So the stakes feel real. All that stuff feels more real. And I found that was highly effective when it came to the show. But yeah, if you're going to watch anything on Disney Plus, I mean, I know some people may like it, some people may hate it, some people, whatever. But if you're going to watch anything on there, and you're at least vaguely familiar with Star Wars, or at least you know the tropes and stuff like that, maybe give this one a chance. Even if you're into more like prestige TV stuff, like, oh, I only watched The Wire and The Sopranos and Game of Thrones, before the last season shit the bed and other stuff like that. That's fine. Or like True Detective and stuff. I feel like this show, just this one, is actually on a par quality wise with what those other shows were doing in terms of storytelling, in terms of like what they did with the budget. It actually feels worth watching, straight up. So anyway, continuing on.
Good world building throughout the show.
I needn't tell you how wrong you were about Uncle Harlow.
But you will.
The crackle of a campfire, the feeling of brokenness to a piece of equipment, the texture and sound of food.
You can live on it. You may question our existence after a few days.
The glow of sunlight coming through a window onto a character's face. These are the sensory details that make the world the characters exist in feel like you could touch it and feel it because they're touching it and feeling it.
It sounds so simple, and
These
yet
sensory
so many
details
shows
go, I think,
mess
a
this
long
up.
way towards making it feel like the characters exist within a multi-dimensional space and aren't just standing on a set or in front of a green screen. And this is one way the show really benefits from shooting on location. There's been a lot of discussion about the other Star Wars shows' use of the volume, and I think this technique can be really effective and has been a step up from just shooting on a green screen for a lot of the work that these shows are doing. But there will always be things that are just harder to get in a studio. For a scene like this, the real fire, the water dripping from the ceiling, and the way you can see their breath can all happen naturally.
So, Mod Hatter, I like Forrest Gump. Great movie. Also, I'm a little sensitive to sensory stuff, so I don't know if I would like the show. Well, that kind of depends on your taste. I don't know why I brought up Forrest Gump. Hey, Forrest Gump is a fun movie. Like, some people have their digs at it, but I think as far as, like, entertaining movies to watch, that's definitely up there, and it continues to be entertaining even now. But in the case of like sensory stuff, if you could be a little more specific as to like what stuff you wouldn't want to be dealing with, I could give you a better recommendation based on that if that's something that you'd be interested in. But overall, I just think the quality of this show blows the other stuff out of the water. And like if you were to compare Mandalorian to this, Mandalorian, not that it's like a super big dig or anything, but Mandalorian compared to this, Mandalorian is like a show for children. This is a show for adults. That's the most stark, like possibly rude way I could frame it, but that's just how I perceive it to be. Now, does it mean they're like cussing in this constantly and there's like horrible violence and stuff? No, not necessarily, but just like thematically and the way that situations are handled, the thought processes, the scheming, the other stuff. Yeah, you get those kinds of things that are kind of in a dumbed down quality in like other shows where it's more digestible for a more mainstream audience who's not looking to think too hard. This one is still very accessible. Like, I think it is mainstream accessible if somebody has the patience to actually just sit and like let it flow over them, just kind of like absorb the environment and the characters and that stuff. If you're really impatient and you have ADHD or some other inability to like sit still and watch like a slow scene with not a lot of talking though, yeah, it could be a little challenging, I think, for some. Honestly, the quality of Chef's Kiss cannot disagree. Yes, so no, that is definitely something. And yeah, Daniel Mao there, you're totally right. Andor has a great story as well, lots to hook you in. Yeah, there's just a lot going on, but not like in a, once again, not in a gimmicky way, the way some of the other shows go, hey, remember this guy? Hey, remember that chick? Hey, remember this storyline? Hey, remember that thing? It's like feeding off nostalgia in those other shows. Whereas in this is much more like, no, we're going to take you on a character-driven journey from this place and watch as they transform as a person by the time they reach the end. Or did they transform as a person? We can judge that. Were they just that person all along? You can make up your own mind on that, but I feel like they give you a lot to chew on there. Mod Hatter, I'll watch a little and see how I feel about it. Oh my god, my ADHD would kill me if it's slow. That's the thing though, Mod Hatter. As far as shows go, it's not like it's abysmally slow. Like there are some shows out there that are prestige television that are very, very, very methodical and slow. This show is just really good at building up tension and intrigue and interest. And then it has a totally worth it payoff or some kind of way to redirect the energy of the story. And then it moves on to the next thing. And then it's like a little bit of setup and then something, but it just, the whole thing feels much more real and grounded. So you're more invested because you feel like, oh, I can totally see this happening if I were, in that guy's shoes or that girl's shoes. What would happen to me? Yeah, probably something like that. It just, something about it draws you in more because you feel like if you lived in a different time, in a different place, and circumstances were such that you were this person, you could see yourself making decisions like that and having to make, hard decisions when you're pressed up against the wire. What are you going to do? This show is just so good at letting that happen. And like, it doesn't resolve a lot of things. Like there'll be characters. It's really cool in the sense like, okay, have you ever worked a job, right? Where you met some people, you worked with some people, and it was like really intense for whatever reason. Maybe the work you were doing was just something that created conditions that forced you to bond with other people because the conditions were so intense or they sucked or just something was not, ideal. So it forced you all to kind of come together and find a way to get through it kind of thing. Maybe you haven't run into that, but anybody who's ever been in a position, or even if it's not like a workplace, it could be something else, just finding that feeling and then building that bond with people. And then the next moment it's just, oh, and now it's over. Now we're doing something different. I honestly don't know what happened to that person, and I may never end up knowing what happened to those people after we, stopped crossing paths, and now we're just not in that space in our lives anymore. And I haven't seen that person in 10 years, and I hope they're okay, but I really don't know, and I wouldn't know how to get back in contact with them, pretending like Facebook doesn't exist and stuff like that. But it's that kind of thing. Like, this show has elements of that, and I think some people, lack the maturity to be able to handle things that are unresolved. Just like, okay, you may never see or hear from that person again. Yes, it seemed very important when you were seeing them on screen for the time you saw them, but that's not the end all be all. As a character, they serve their purpose, but now, just like in real life, that person you met who seemed very important at the time is now just a distant memory, just a glimmer in the past, and that's all you got. Yeah, so you can tell I'm like waxing poetic about this show, but I love it so much. It's just that good. So yeah, it makes me, it's the first show I watched in a while, like especially on Disney Plus, that actually made me want to talk about it. Whereas I feel like the other shows I watched, like especially the Marvel stuff, my eyes just kind of glazed over and I went, well, that happened. Whereas in the case of Andor, I was just like, oh my God, okay, what's next? What are they going to do? Like, it's just, I was way more invested in it. So if you can give me this much info about this show, I suppose it's worth a watch. No, and that's just me operating purely off the top of my head. Like, I can recall specific details from this show that if you were to ask me to do the same thing with one of the other shows I watched on Disney Plus, I probably couldn't. And I pay attention to this stuff, and I still probably couldn't because it's just so forgettable. This is not one of those shows. It's so crazy to think that you can make a show like this and have something like Book of Boba Fett or Obi-Wan right there. And it's supposedly under a similar power. It's all Star Wars, but oh my God, the people in charge of this one, night and day in terms of like competence to execution factor on this show versus those other shows. Like, you have Obi-Wan, like probably considered to be, other than Darth Vader, the most notable character in all. Yeah, Luke Skywalker, etc. But like Obi-Wan, he's the one that everybody knows. You got Ewan McGregor, and it's great. And I love Ewan McGregor as that. I think he's great. But in that show, oh my God, I could barely watch it. It was kind of excruciating at times. I mean, it was rough. And yes, I watched the whole thing, but good luck trying to get me to explain, anything that I felt was worth reiterating to somebody else to say, hey, maybe you should watch it. I wouldn't say that. I could care less. It just felt inconsequential. It was whatever. And it still feels kind of childish and stuff. And I get some of these things, they're for kids. Don't be one of those adults who like becomes a Disney adult or whatever. Like, I'm not that. All I know is this show, just separate the Disney from it, separate the Star Wars from it. Yes, the universe it takes place in is Star Wars, but that's one of the things I always liked about Star Wars was the fact that it gave you a great platform to tell stories that weren't about the main characters you saw in the original trilogy. There's so many other interesting things you could do in this, frankly, very simple concept of Empire and Rebels, imperialism, natives trying to fight for their lives. Like, there's just all these elements of like really basic stuff that transcends all other aspects. I mean, it's a very universal story that most people could understand, unless, you know, say they are an imperialist and it's their job not to understand, right? But barring that, like, there's a lot of room for people to appreciate this on different levels. And I just found like it was firing on all cylinders. So anyway, yeah, you get me talking about it, and I just want to talk about it more. It was that good. So anyway, Rogue One, this show, forget all the other Star Wars crap, other than the original trilogy, because those are classics and wonderful in their own way. But this is just good.
When you're filming on location, but would take tons of effort to actually recreate on a set.
Memorable, isn't it?
The third technique we see in this opening, and that's used throughout the show very effectively, is perspective. We don't just swoop in from above on a digital landscape of this city. We see it from the walkway, from Andor's perspective. A lot of times these days, if I'm being honest, my eyes just kind of glaze over when I see these kind of digital wide establishing shots. For me, so often they don't actually do anything towards making me understand.
It's different if you're watching like Blade Runner, you know, the original one, or even 2049, the sequel that came out in 2017. If you're watching either of those, they have these wide sweeping shots of like future LA that looks very grand and it's interesting, but there's something that actually draws you in and still makes you feel like, okay, that's worth watching. Whereas some of this stuff in the Star Wars ones where they try and like recreate kind of that Blade Runner aesthetic or whatever, I feel like it just backfires. And like he says, your eyes just glaze over because you're like, oh, I've seen this a bajillion times. It's all made in a computer and I have zero interest beyond, well, any of this. So yeah, no thanks. But it's true. It does kind of throw you out. Whereas this show, what's really cool about it is it does ground you in the space first and then works its way up and out from that. So you always feel like it's something that you could find yourself in.
And what the characters are experiencing or what the place feels like. When I'm watching a show like this and I'm trying to get emotionally invested in what the characters are experiencing, I don't want to feel like I'm riding in a helicopter over the location the characters are standing in. I want to feel like I'm standing in the location with them. One of the things that Andor does really well is show us the details of the worlds from an inside perspective. You're actually looking at and seeing these worlds from the same perspective as the characters, and these shots put you in their shoes. A lot of shows jump from a wide establishing VFX shot straight to close-ups within a scene on a green screen or within a smaller set. And when they do that, they skip past the portions where we as the viewer get to see the locations in the same way we often experience locations in our real lives. But the show's use of perspective goes far beyond just how the VFX are presented, and it's a big part of what I love about the show. We also experience the story from the perspective of the characters that are within it. As the audience, we know about a lot of the big level, huge Star Wars ships and politics and events that are taking place on a grander scale, but the characters in this story don't have that broad overview experience. They're operating with limited knowledge and trying their best to do what they can to further their rebellion while they have to make judgments based on the little amount of information they know.
Another reason I love this show so much compared to
we don't get information or get to see things that the individual characters don't get to see. I mean, imagine you're a character who spent their whole life on a minor planet, just minding your own business. And maybe you've heard about a Star Destroyer, but
Haha, minding your own business. Ha ha ha.
You've never seen one. And suddenly this appears in your sky.
Yeah, it's a little
terrifying.
And that's a huge thing, is like when you see ships and stuff happening in this show, it feels so much more important because once again it's from a character level perspective, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have the same like, oh look, laser swords and oh my god, air to air ship battles and all that stuff. Yes, you have moments of that, but they always feel super earned in how this show proceeds. It's not boring. It is not boring. Like there's reaction in it and there's a lot of shooting in it, but at the same time, like it all feels purposeful and meaningful, and people actually get hit. It's not just like, oh, a guy gets hit and he goes down and then he's just like crawling and then he ends up being fine. No, like when somebody dies in the show frequently, it's just like, oh, they're dead. And yeah, that makes it all the more scary and intense and just like edge of your seat when stuff is going down, because it does such a good job building that tension until it's finally time to pop the balloon. But you're always wondering how it's going to happen, and it tends to surprise you, and that's what I really enjoyed about it.
Contextualizing this big iconic thing by showing it from a completely different perspective is a great way to breathe some fresh life into a cool piece of world building that has almost become stale and commonplace in the Star Wars canon at this point. It's not really that we've never seen these ships from the perspective of the ground before in Star Wars media, but what Andor really commits to is only showing us these things from the character's perspective. The way they use the ships in this show is closer to how a good horror film director uses a monster in their movies.
Get down! Yes!
They show just little bits here and there, and it's more the implication of what that means than actually seeing it that creates suspense and drama for the viewers.
So when I say the show's a little slower, that's the kind of stuff I talk about. It's not boring. It's
what
just
I would describe as the show having a specific vision. What makes this illusion of reality work is everything working together. The props, the cinematography, the set design, the costume design, all of it is in service of the story and also telling that story in a specific way. In an article for Rolling Stone.
So, Yoshi, Caesar, I'm not doing any spoilers here because I figure most people haven't watched this show, but you missed the part where I spent like the last 20 minutes going on a very long positive diatribe about why I enjoyed Andor so much, and I put it as being the best Star Wars property since the original trilogy and maybe Rogue One, in my personal opinion. When it comes to the other, newer trilogy and Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, that other stuff, Mandalorian is fun. It's like popcorn movie fun in its own way, but it's still more childish and that kind of thing. This series actually felt so much more adult, and like it feels like it could absolutely be in the same vein as like, okay, put it up against, okay, maybe not The Wire, but, True Detective, because True Detective got bad after a while, but there was definitely a point where it was fantastic in that first season, or, other shows where it's just like, it's a really, really good show on its own merits, separate it from all the, Star Warsiness or the Disneyness, just watching it as a show, as its own standalone thing. Just imagine it's some random sci-fi thing, and you're like, oh, wow, this is actually compelling stuff. And it's just well written, and it's much better. So, yeah, I get you on the last episode. I can see why some people would be like, it's not. But once again, a 7 out of 10 episode in a series that overall is like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 compared to its siblings, to me is a win. Like, I don't mind that. And it's probably like small reasons why opinions might differ on that one. But I can feel you. I can see why you might feel that way. But oh my god, the entire series build up. Like, I wouldn't discourage anybody from watching it. If you kind of wondered and you feel fatigued about like, oh, all this Marvel crap, I'm tired of it. All this other stuff, all these Star Wars things, they just get in mediocre. I could care less about, this Book of Boba Fett thing. Like, oh, maybe originally I thought Boba Fett was cool when I was a kid in the 90s. But, then we do the series and it's kind of eh. And I mean, like, Obi-Wan was a huge letdown as a show. It was just like, oh, what is this? Did not enjoy. It was a hard watch for me. Like, I forced myself to get through it to the end, and I did not enjoy it. Like, there were elements of it I liked, but overall as a show I just felt like it was just a flop. And then people, because of those other things, or because they heard those other shows were mid, they then take that and go, oh, absolutely. Andor is definitely one of those ones where it's just like, oh god, another Star Wars show. And so people just take that information from the prior letdowns and just immediately go, yeah, I'm not touching that, whatever, fine, bye. Not realizing that Andor, because you have to give it the time of day, is actually blows the other stuff out of the water. It is actually worth every bit of your attention. Absolutely. If you enjoyed Rogue One, you will definitely like Andor, but I feel like Andor in terms of quality actually exceeds Rogue One, because Rogue One, well, yes, it, ignoring spoilers here, we're not doing any of that here. I'm just trying to get people interested enough to go check these things out. I would say when it comes to Rogue One, it still had some of those kind of like Disneyfied, kid-friendly kind of aspects, whereas in this show in Andor, I felt like it was more grown up, even more mature, even than Rogue One was. For better or for worse, it depends on what you're looking for. But for me, like as a guy in his 30s watching this stuff, I was really impressed at like the maturity level of this show and how it approached like all these different issues people were having, and like broad scope, imperialism kind of stuff. Like it was cooler to watch that while still having it be mainstream accessible than any of the other Star Wars stuff. Like that's what I liked about Star Wars originally, was like all the possibilities in the extended universe going beyond the original characters, where okay, these characters, you kind of know what you're getting already. Some can be kind of one note and you're just like, okay, I've had enough of that. I'd like to see something different. And the beauty of Andor is that it's just mostly normal people. You're not dealing with like super powered people or any of this other kind of stuff. Sure, some people are exceptionally talented, but they're all just regular people for the most part. So you feel like it's much more grounded. And that's what I keep going back to on the show is I'm very passionate about this one because I just watched the finale yesterday. But man, I love this show so much compared to any of that other stuff. Mandalorian included. Like, sure, as far as Disney Plus stuff goes, Mandalorian is, second to me after Andor as far as a Star Wars show, but I'll be honest, it's a distant second, even though it's had its time. Like Andor to me, just quality, what I'm looking for in a show, interest level, all that. I'm way more about way more about Andor than even I was about Mandalorian. End of episode 10 was that line after all that work. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. So yeah, I don't want to blow up for anybody. I want people to actually go and take a chance and just go watch it. It released with its first 3 episodes out there, but the thing to know about it is that it kind of dwells in a setting and handles stuff in a space for like 3 episodes, and then it moves on to another thing and another thing. So if you ever feel like some other shows that like move every episode as a new place, a new thing, it's different than that. But it's not slow and it's not boring. It's just methodical and it takes its time more. So if you're willing to give that a chance, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you just understand going in, it's going to be a more mature show. But yeah, as far as like kids watching it, I feel like it's less accessible to kids than other Star Wars properties would be. But for adults who grew up on this stuff and are looking for something a little more mature, like the closest thing you can have to a prestige TV show based around a property that was originally just meant to be a summer blockbuster action movie for kids kind of thing, this is about as good as it can get. So that's just my own personal take. But anyway, I'll let this keep going because I keep talking everyone's ear off. Then again, it is my Twitch stream. I'm kind of supposed to do that.
Stone, lead actor Diego Luna said something that I think encapsulates the vision for the show really well. We are stressing that change and revolution happen when regular people decide to do something. It's just regular people trying to survive in the darkest time in this galaxy and finding out they can't take it anymore. It's about a system that is choking society. Yeah. The theme of the rebellion being driven and fueled by regular people isn't just created by the writing and what the show's about. It's reinforced by the style of the show. The regularness and everydayness of the characters is conveyed through the show's commitment to creating this sense of reality. It's conveyed through tiny things like the fact that the characters are actually eating and drinking frequently throughout the show. because these are
It's a
just
small touch,
regular
but it
people
works.
going about their lives trying to figure out how to
Totally
create or
works.
squash a rebellion at the same time.
I couldn't sleep.
It's natural.
I need to be at my best.
Andor is doing something that I think is really original within the Star Wars world. It's stepping away from this huge feeling of destiny, fate, and mythos that runs through most of the canon. It's not that that's inherently better, but I think doing that allows the show to explore some complex themes and new territory in a way that wasn't really possible
And it makes it
before
feel
in
a
any
lot
of the
more
other Star
fresh
Wars
in the
stuff.
process.
It's saying, what if we looked at the rebellion and really examined the parts that aren't about shooting a huge ship down with lasers or training to become an elite warrior class so you can fulfill your destiny and save the galaxy? It's saying, what if we examine the complex moral and ethical dilemmas faced by each individual as they feel cornered into fighting for what they believe in?
Now, if that sounds boring to you, sorry, but that's my jam. I am all about that, what he just said. So, yeah, this show is an excellent dissection of exactly that.
What if we focused in on the compromise and the gray areas? To me, the beauty of this show is all the characters surrounding Cassian Andor, an opportunistic mercenary who gets caught up in the rebellion.
He knows nothing about any of it.
The show explores with nuance how every character has to make sacrifices, compromises, or pay a price in order to get what they want. The scenes of Imperial opposition as well aren't cartoonish. Instead, it focuses on the nuance of bureaucratic politics and how individuals striving for power can create tyrannical overreach.
But once again, it's not boring. It's actually incredibly relatable because I guarantee in those scenes, in those rooms, you run into somebody like one of those people at some point in your life, whether it was in a workplace or just in a place you were visiting. It was definitely happening somewhere around you.
These are what feel like real-world stakes that are more relevant to our lives. It's not about being plucked out of obscurity and trained for greatness. It isn't just a simple commitment to fight against a pure image
Alex
of evil.
is here.
It's a world where you have to choose between two different values that you hold that have suddenly come into conflict because of external factors that are outside of your control.
I won't have peace. I'll be worried about you all the time.
That's just love.
You know, like stuff we have to deal with as humans sometimes.
And Alex, if you want to see me wax poetic about Andor, feel free when this stream is done to go back and watch the first 20-30 minutes, because I promise you I really covered a lot of ground already when it came to my love of this show. So yeah, I'm not going to bore everybody who's been watching this whole time with reiterating everything I've already said, but just know that I'm recommending this to anybody and everybody I can, regardless of how you feel about the other shows on Disney's, take on Star Wars and stuff. This is well, okay, maybe that's being strong, but this is significantly better in terms of quality, from the writing to the acting to the set design to what they did with their budget compared to any of the other stuff. And I'm including the new movies in that too. With the exception of Rogue One, Andor is the only thing that I felt like really stood up as its own property, its own interesting thing. And that's what I'm really excited to see people do with Star Wars as a property, exploring something outside of what we already know. Because that was a whole fun of the universe for anybody read the extended universe books as a kid, in the 90s or whatever, or played some of the games that expanded the lore and stuff. If that was of interest to you, then I feel like these do a much better job of approaching that kind of material than the movies have done since the original trilogy. So yeah, no, that's take on it. But yes, I enjoyed The Mandalorian too. I've already said it a bunch of times at this point, but Mandalorian was enjoyable, but more in a popcorn enjoyable kind of way, and it's much more for kids, I feel, than Andor is. Andor is a much more grown-up, mature show, at least in my opinion, and I feel like it takes more of a mature sensibility to appreciate it as a show too. But for those of you who do, I feel like it's very, very rewarding, and you won't regret watching it. So that's me just giving a hard recommendation on that one.
Ultimately, Andor is a well-constructed, well-written, suspenseful, sci-fi spy thriller that also happens to be a Star Wars show.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for watching. I want to talk about two things real quick. If you want to help support my...
All right, so that was the channel Thomas Flight. He does interesting dissections of film and TV and some other stuff too. Yes, it can get a little pretentious sometimes, but you know what? When I'm not talking about cars and detailing or architecture and other stuff, this is the kind of stuff I'm into. So yeah, not for everybody, but I wanted to give you just a little taste and try and sell you on the idea of watching the show. If you haven't considered it, please do. Just my 2 cents. All right, moving along here, let's go ahead and take a look at, oh yeah, CNET. So CNET does a lot of car reviews, and they have this guy, I believe his name is Brian Cooley. He's an amusing guy, one of those guys who I don't always agree with his opinions, but I feel like he's pretty well-founded in how he comes to his conclusions, and yeah, I'm always curious to see what he has to say. He and like Jason Camisa and a few other people are like automotive journalists that I happen to really like, more opinionated, that kind of thing. But yeah, anyway, let's just see. He says he doesn't own an EV yet. Here's why. And Yoshi, you know that we've already talked. I listened to that episode, by the way, on Matt Ferris' Smoking Tire podcast with the lady who was in charge of like New Jersey Department of Transportation and other stuff like that, all about like EV infrastructure, all those other things. Super fascinating. That was a great recommendation. I was planning on listening to that anyway, but on some of my walks I've been doing, I've just been, digesting that, listening to it, and that was great. So highly recommend that to anybody who's kind of curious about like, I feel like a lot of companies are pushing the EV thing, but we don't really have the infrastructure for it. Yes, stuff will evolve over time, but what does that mean for society? There's a lot of interesting implications there, and not all of them are good. So anyway, let's see what Brian here says.
In my line of work, as you can imagine, I get asked all the time, do you have an EV? And I don't. And here's why. Not that I've got all the answers, but it might help inform you in your search of yours. Perhaps number one of all my reasons is that this is a lousy time to buy any car unless you have to. With supply chain issues, with inflation, and with what's going on with kind of some weird new market dynamics out there, changing from combustion to electric models, this is a really expensive time to buy a new or used car. I don't relish getting in line to pay top dollar for something which depreciates.
That's a fair point. Also, in my case, because I did just buy a used car recently, on that front, I've been monitoring the prices on Ford Flexes, specifically the limited trim, top trim, EcoBoost all-wheel drive ones. And yeah, I've kept a very, very close eye on the market for those. So where I got mine, I got a good deal, all things considered. So I'm not upset. Like, I found myself in a position to be able to do that, but I had been holding off for years until I found the one that had all the things I was looking for. So yeah, I mean, I was patient about it. I took my time, and when I finally got around to seeing one that was local, that was the right color scheme, that had all the options I wanted, all that stuff, I jumped on it, and most importantly, the price had to be right. So yeah, I took the leap on it, but not before waiting a very long time to come across the right combination of factors. Even in a market like this, it is possible to find a used car that fits the bill for you. But I will say, if you're looking at financing anything, the financing arm of stuff, if you're not using like a local credit union or something, the rates are absolutely insane. I mean, obviously the Fed kept boosting that stuff. You had to deal with a lot of different changes in the market. Just borrowing money is far more expensive than it used to be. Over time, that'll probably start to change. The things will reverse a little bit, but it hasn't fully happened right now. It's cooling off here and there, but it is not completely turned around yet. We're still definitely in the inflated period of things. But, you know, even in my case, I had a great credit score, and it was still like pretty high, higher than I would have originally been comfortable with a long time ago. But knowing I was going to pay it off pretty quickly, I didn't feel as bad doing it. I'm still like, even with a superb credit score, like I really built that thing up. I was at like 6 and some odd % on a 60-month loan, even though I'm going to pay it off and there's no early termination fee. It was just, yeah, it's still higher than I would like, but that's life. My cousin just sold his '09 Accord for a new Model Y for his wife. Not sure how I feel about it, but happy for them. I mean, I get it on some level. Like the '09 Accord would have run just fine for those folks, I'm sure. But I'm never going to get on somebody's case for replacing a sedan with a hatchback. Once again, that's personal taste, but I'm not even looking at it as reliable old internal combustion car to new EV. I'm looking at it as you had a trunk and now you got a hatchback. More practical for most people's uses. However, there's going to be trade-offs. But really, the Model Y, for like the MPC mobile that it's going to be, makes perfect sense. Like for a lot of people, that's the most car anybody really needs. The only thing I have to say about Model Ys that's really negative beyond the obvious stuff, like the build quality is questionable, things like that from time to time, I kind of feel like, it's it's still expensive. They haven't gotten to a point where you're going to find an EV, even from Tesla, with the supposed, the Model 3 is going to be the cheap one. Well, it's still like $60,000 if you have any of the options you want or whatever. It's just like, eh. And the Model Y is kind of the same deal. It's still basically the size of like a RAV4 or something, but people are turning to that. Now, in my own personal opinion, if I were shopping and I wasn't, like in my case, specifically looking for a Ford Flex with an EcoBoost and all-wheel drive and all that stuff, the other car I would have been looking for, if I was only to have one vehicle and I had to find something that hit all those marks of like, oh, I want it to be fuel efficient, I don't want to be paying for gas all the time with it, I would strongly be considering a plug-in hybrid. Like a PHEV is much more my speed than a full-on EV. A full-on EV is nice for an appliance that, go to and from, but as soon as I go on a road trip, I'm sorry, I just don't want to deal with the infrastructure of anything to charge on my drives where I have to seek it out and have to find the right thing. Like gas stations are everywhere, you take it for granted. And in the case of Tesla, you have the supercharger network. But if you have any other EV that's not, a Tesla, the charger network is spotty at best. And a lot of times they'll tell you, oh, we get paid to build these things. We get paid to put them out there, but we don't get paid to repair them. So you'll run into like Electrify America stations and stuff where they're just not running. They're just not working. It's like they went to the trouble of building all these ones. You're like, great, look at all this coverage I got. And then you show up and the thing's got little plastic baggie over it going, sorry, out of order or whatever. And it sucks. Nobody wants to deal with that. I mean, at gas stations, you may occasionally run into a pump that's like that, but there's always other pumps you can go to. Whereas with electric charging stations, if you happen to come across one and there's one out, sometimes that's the only one that's there. Very often, it's just a small handful that are available. But yeah, no, it's definitely a little frustration. And yeah, Yoshi, cargo area is much larger on the Model Y. Yeah, like I was saying. Plus, he lifted the cargo cover, the storage under the floor. Holy shit, you can fit a person under there. Yeah, it's the beauty of EVs. It's the packaging. Put the batteries down low, and everything else is just free space. I mean, depending on how you package it. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of more the skateboard method where you put it all down low and then you can just change what body style or things you want on top. But yeah, that way you can get the best economies of scale for like battery packaging, that kind of stuff. Sorry about the lack of punctuation. Don't worry about it. You're fine, Yoshi. Portion file, agreed. If I did it over, I get a PHEV instead of my Polestar. Okay, yeah. So you have a Polestar 2, I'm guessing, because the Polestar 1 was incredibly expensive and very cool looking, but a little bit funky. Yeah, so it's a 2. And in the case of the Polestar 1 is a plug-in hybrid, but it's like a fully carbon fiber, $150,000 crazy thing that's more of a, rich guy plaything than anything else. Yeah, but you get a PHEV instead of your Polestar. I get that. I can see that. For me, like one of the most appealing, yay, metric units. One of the most appealing of the PHEVs that I've seen is something like, and I know it's going to be silly because I promise I don't give a shit about Ford as a company, and yet I seem to keep buying their products because they seem to have the vehicles that fit the niches I'm looking for. For better or for worse, they just seem to have the right vehicles for the niche that appeals to me. If I had Model Y money and I was shopping for something that I could daily drive in great comfort, get all the creature comforts I wanted, not worry too much about gas mileage, be ready for road trips, all that kind of stuff. You know what would honestly appeal to me more than almost anything else? I find, and this is going to sound super dumb because I'm a sports car person at heart, I really like the Lincoln Aviator PHEV. If you haven't looked that one up, it's basically plug-in hybrid meets EcoBoost meets all-wheel drive with newer Lincoln interior design. And if you've seen the newer Navigators and stuff, you realize, oh, they're not just shitty, cheap, lame American luxury interiors anymore. They're actually doing something interesting. If you look at the Lincoln Aviator as for packaging, it's similar in size to like my Flex, but a little bit taller, a little more normal SUV looking, but it's pleasant enough to look at. Maybe you change something about the styling on it, but oh my God, combining the plug-in aspect where you're just doing regular like grocery trips and stuff, you do that, you do your basic, driving around 30 miles or less on, pure electric power. And then the rest of the time, like going on a road trip or whatever, you don't have to worry about it, but you won't be filling up that gas tank anytime soon. That's awesome. Like I love the combination of, oh, you get high performance because you have over 400 horsepower, but then you also have a battery for pure EV driving around local stuff. It's the best of both worlds. And the reason I can speak to it is because I had a C-Max Energy for quite a while. I had that for several years, and I loved that car. And once again, it was always another oddball. Like it was a Ford product that I bought that fit the niche I was looking for at the time. And I owned that thing, well, back when PHEVs and EVs were not really popular at all. I owned that thing back in like 2015, 2016. So it was before a lot of this other stuff was really picking up and the interest levels were there. But I'll tell you what, you charge that thing at night in the garage and you could drive an EV and not fill up your, gas for probably a month, 2 months even sometimes, even longer, until you went on a road trip. And the best part, I had like 620 plus miles of range when I went on a road trip in that thing. Awesome. The only big drawback to it, despite looking like a fat Focus, it was like a little overly tall, was the fact that the battery that they add to the Energy model, which is the battery version above the standard hybrid version, it's the one where you can actually charge up a battery in the back, is it creates a little hump in the storage area. And that was a trade-off. So you didn't necessarily have quite the same level of space in the back that I really would have wanted. But, well, that's very nice. Thank you, anonymous user who gifted to Alex. That's super great. Thank you. Let me go ahead and check on your comments here. Dane's Deflated Pool. Sorry, I will always drive an ICE. No EV for me if you want to travel. Well, Dane's Deflated Pool. That's exactly why I like the PHEV, the plug-in hybrid, where you get all of the ICE aspects that you know and love, but you have a battery pack built in that gives you extended, ability to drive without wasting fuel. So like when you're sitting and idling, you can idle like in a parking lot or something while not putting out any gas. You're not burning any gas. You can just sit there and like me, you're eating in your car or something like that. I know it's sacrilege to some people, but that's awesome to me. And you don't have to worry about those stupid signs that are always out there like, hey, don't idle in our parking lot or, stuff like that. It's the little things. It's just, it solves a lot of that stuff. But I drive an EV. We use my wife's ICE vehicle when we take a road trip longer than 400 kilometers. And okay, we need high output input solar to charge while driving to be self-sufficient. I love the idea of solar. The only problem is like you're right about the efficiency aspect. The panels need to be so large. Like a lot of people, I think, unaware of like how much square, footage is needed to like truly harness the power of the sun to power your car. They'll be like, why don't we just have solar roofs on cars? And it's like in very rare occasions, you'll have a vehicle that has a solar roof, like on the Prius or on a Fisker Karma or something like that. You'll have a solar roof, but it's only ever enough to really charge like the 12-volt battery, like the regular car battery, not the big, big battery that you charge up at night in the car. It's just enough to keep the accessories running and not worry about the rest. So it's kind of a different animal, and that's using a whole roof on a not small vehicle. So you would need to have like a full Sprinter van just to be able to charge a lot of those accessories. Yoshi, I like my sooty mobiles, aside from the current price of the fuel itself. Yes. Yoshi, I do love a good sporty version of a diesel, things like that. In terms of energy density, I love that about him. It's just the fuel itself is routinely the most expensive thing around here, at least where I live. It's commonly just something that I'm so glad I sold my huge ass Dat Booty F350 dually pickup truck, because that thing was a nightmare to fill up on diesel when diesel was not expensive around here. God help you if you're the person who owns that now. I mean, if I had held on to that thing, I could have had like $300 visits to the gas station. Not my cup of tea. I don't know about you guys, but not for me. Not my thing. Yeah, crazy. Just crazy. Because even at the time, I was paying well over 120, 130 bucks to fill that thing. F350 with 55-gallon fuel tank. Fun time. Yeah, Yoshi. Whew. It's not for everybody. Yeah. So let's see what else we got here. Recently drove to St. Louis and took the Fiat instead because I didn't want to deal with 4 stops each way. Yeah. Curious, what Fiat were you driving? Okay. All right, let me continue the video here. You guys go ahead and keep talking there. I'm just interested. I like the dialogue. Keep it up.
Compounding that point is the fact that I generally try not to buy new cars. I love lightly used, well cared for, late model used
EV bill,
cars.
13 bucks. Yeah, dude.
It's just a really smart way to buy. However, I do acknowledge that you've got to be pretty flexible in what kind of car you're going to get. You don't just pick what you want or configure and order it. And you have to realize that there are some additional headaches with any used car. You're buying down the trough, if you will, and you know, often someone else's problems become yours. But overall, I do really well with late model used cars, and there are not enough electrics in history for that to be a really robust market just yet.
Very true. Not everybody wants to buy a horrifically depleted first generation Leaf for like 8,000 bucks, only to be able to go like 50 or 70 miles before, well, gotta charge it again. You know? And I say this as somebody who does like EVs for many different reasons, but yeah, some of the earlier ones you're going to be dealing with stuff that just frankly, you know, it's more of a pain than positive. Bucky, I've always been more worried about high diesel prices versus gas because a high percentage of logistics, i.e. trucking and shipping, that kind of stuff. Logistics relies on diesel, thus higher prices for just about everything. Yes, mechanics wearing gloves tell me it's stock footage without telling me it's stock footage. You're right. Nobody in that video actually knows how to work on a car. They just look like it. But the dead giveaway is the fact that they're wearing gloves. Oh my God, you guys actually know what PPE is? Get out of here. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about, yeah, trucking, things like that being affected, shipping. I mean, even, you know, diesel electric trains, all that stuff, it's all affected by it. So yeah, diesel, there's a lot of price sensitivity with it. Unfortunately, it just got expensive, and that's been the reality over here for quite a while, but I don't know how things are in your neck of the woods. I know that it always costs around here more than even premium gasoline does. There were times where it used to be pretty close, but now I feel like it's been leading the charge for a while. But yeah, I take everything he said here about buying used pretty much on the spot.
Oh, by the way, when I do buy a used EV, which I probably will, I'm not going to be too concerned about the fact that it'll have some depreciated range on its battery. That's fine by me. See my piece recently about a reality check for how much range you really need. It's less than you think.
Fair point. Not everybody's going to agree there, but I think in real world expectations, some people just get the anxiety, the paranoia of like, oh, I'm going to run out, when in reality they're fine. But yeah, like for plug-in hybrids, yeah, Jeep's done that with their newer Cherokees and their Wranglers. There's different stuff out there. Anthony gets his trucks for free or ghetto police lot. Hondas with tampered fuel pump relays. Yes. Oh, speaking of diesel electric, have you seen the Edison Motors truck? No, Yoshi. You got a link to that or something? This isn't going to be like another Lordstown Motors or another Nikola kind of situation, is it? because I have a hard time trusting something with Edison directly in the name. Just, you know, understanding basic history and how Edison was kind of a piece of shit.
My next concern is there has to be
Okay, maybe piece of shit was the wrong term. He was a real bastard, though.
something more than Tesla, right? Tesla makes some great cars. However, I know there are a whole bunch of more great cars.
Of course, if we've known anything, yeah, probably a stolen idea. If there's one thing we can understand about history, though, you can be a dick and still make something that's actually worth checking out, like an actual good thing. Bad people can do good things. It is a known fact that that is possible. They may not do it for the right reasons, but that's a story for another day. All right. Soon as this video's... Oh, this is like only 2 minutes in. Okay. How long is this video, Yoshi? Let me check it out.
And before we get to our next guest, here's a little...
Interesting. That's the electric truck that actually works. This one is actually legit versus you-know-who. Okay. Okay. I gotcha. Well, tell you what. I will check that one out next. Yeah. Teslas do not make good cars. Great tech, not good cars. Yeah, no, I mean, build quality, all that kind of stuff. It's been said a million times and it's been beat to death, but as we pretty much understand it now, Tesla is a technology company first and a car company maybe second or somewhere further down the line. It's a money-making enterprise and, you know, a bit of a... not always a grift, but it kind of feels like it sometimes. Yeah, that stock price, though. Whoa. Anyway, excuse me. Yeah, no, I've always wondered that, though, with how many gasoline electric hybrids were out there. Why was there never a mainstream diesel electric vehicle brought to market? That was something that always bothered me because I was like, diesel's going to be more efficient than gasoline, all other things being equal, in pretty much every scenario. The only thing is it comes down to emissions. But you know what? When you have electric combined with your diesel, you're offsetting some of those emissions too. So why hasn't somebody done that? And I kind of felt like, well, maybe people just wanted to push straight to EVs. But I'm a big proponent of plug-in hybrids. I prefer that personally, just for the peace of mind. I mean, for whatever future Mad Max hell awaits us, I'd like to be able to have the ability to do a little charging and a little gas whenever I feel like it. Thank you very much. But yeah, no, the diesel electric thing is definitely appealing. I've been asking myself that for years, and I just never saw anybody come out with something like that. So apparently this Edison truck is anything like that. That's going to be interesting. And yeah, PHEVs have a smaller carbon footprint than full BEVs. You have an excellent point there too, because for those who don't realize, in the case of a plug-in hybrid versus a BEV, which is a battery electric vehicle, the plug-in hybrid is going to have a much smaller battery, for one thing, which requires a lot less mining for rare earth minerals, all that kind of stuff. Yes, it's still happening, but on a much smaller scale. And when you divide that up amongst however many vehicles, you can produce a lot more vehicles that are PHEV than you could with the same amount of resources for BEV. And those cars will not have range anxiety problems. They will still have a lower, much, much, much lower carbon output than a full internal combustion vehicle will. It's just a whole lot of positives. So yeah, I mean, everybody's turning to the electric thing, but once again, I'm a big fan of plug-in hybrids. So I totally would lean that way. But yes, you're absolutely right about that, Dan. That is exactly what I was thinking. I've always kind of felt that way, but no, when you actually lay it out on paper, it makes perfect sense. And yeah, great intermediate product while the charging grid grows. Yeah, the grid will be able to handle eventually as long as you build to accommodate it. However, a mass shift just straight over an EV right away is increasing the load so much that a lot of these places just won't be ready for it. So by giving you a chance to kind of wean off of one into the other, you can still enjoy like all the vroom vroom noises from a plug-in hybrid. You can just opt to, you know, hit the button that locks out EV or locks out gas, and you can choose which one you want to go with. And I love that. I think that's awesome. Yes, You do incur some additional weight versus a pure ICE, internal combustion vehicle, but it weighs a lot less than a full-on battery electric vehicle as well. So for many applications, it is a very, very happy medium. Is it a perfect one? No, it's compromised in some ways, but overall, I feel like it's much, much more of a positive than it is a negative. Yeah, your sedan is 5,000 pounds. That's, yeah, wow. I'm assuming your Polestar 2. Yeah. So your Polestar 2 weighs about 200 pounds more than my Flex, which is insane. Yeah, no, diesel electric would have 100% been in the future if Dieselgate hadn't happened. I'm inclined to agree with that, Yoshi. I feel like Volkswagen's expertise in the diesel side of things really could have gone that route if not for, well, that. Although, in Le Mans racing, the people who were kind of the pioneers of the diesel electric stuff, yeah, Audi was doing that, but wasn't Peugeot also really, really heavy into the diesel electric hybrid, like Le Mans prototype racers? If I recall, they were kind of one of the original OG types who were doing that. But anyway, I'll continue on this video. It's all interesting stuff. I'm glad we're having this conversation and people actually agree with me, because I always feel like I'm just a lone voice screaming into the void, but it's nice to know there are other people out there who feel the same way.
Cars from great car makers coming, and some are on the market now. General Motors and Hyundai and Kia are just some examples, but we're about to see a lot of other shoes drop. I just feel like it's still a little early,
badass looking
and
car.
we're going to see a lot of other definitions and visions of the market than just the company that's done so far. Now, along those lines, I've covered a lot of technology revolutions in my career, and one thing I've noticed, in their first 7 to maybe 10 years, they're typified by some real cutting-edge leaders and convulsive innovation, and then you settle into 3, maybe 4 leaders, really more like 3, that have almost equally good products that do all about the same thing, and the differences end up being minor. That's the kind of healthy, competitive, robust market that I like to spend my own money in when I'm buying tech.
True.
We do not have that right now. That requires some patience. 18 to 24 months, you're going to have a completely different landscape of really credible cars to consider.
I do feel like GM is leaning heavily into they call it the Ultium platform, where it's going to be kind of that skateboard style thing, which they previewed back in the mid 2000s. They had an EV skateboard that they were talking about dropping different vehicles onto. I think they kind of changed that up, but they adopted some of that idea into what they're doing now. And I feel like over time, they're going to be pretty strong on that front. But, time will tell. And hey, look, it's your car, Dan. Another upside of a plug-in over a battery is life PO4 of batteries versus lithium ion. Yes, so there's definitely trade-offs there as well, but overall, it's just you're not worrying about lithium ion the same way. That's always nice because in my experience, lithium ion is the more fire-prone one, whereas the life PO4, you don't have to worry about that as much, right? Isn't that kind of the main appeal there? Or am I missing something?
Now, when it comes to charging, I'm not terribly concerned. I live in a single-family home. I would install a level 2 charge connector, and I'd be good to go. Although there are some interesting new rumblings out there that we should spend more time charging during the day at public locations, not focus so much on overnight charging at our home location. This was the big thrust of an interesting new study coming out of Stanford not too long ago. It found that there are real benefits to the stability and the greenness of the grid if we charge that way, and not just at home at night. It rattles around the back of my mind, and I think, it's not a bad thing to take advantage of tomorrow's infrastructure if
that's about how much solar you need.
Of waiting a little longer. Then there are a couple of conundrums that are always kind of nagging at the back of my mind. The 2 big setbacks. You typically buy an EV because you want to reduce emissions and reduce your cost per mile of driving, right? Great ideas. Except up front for the first year or 2 or maybe longer, you actually are putting more emissions in the environment and spending more money. More emissions because you caused a car to be manufactured and all of its materials to be produced and shipped, assembled, and then shipped to you. There's a notable and real carbon load there. And you're spending more money because, well, let's face it, you went out and bought a car that you probably didn't really need.
Yeah, Yoshi, that is kind of an ironic bit when you consider that the Life PO4 batteries are essentially, yeah, lasting 4 to 5 times longer, and they're just one part of the propulsion system of the vehicle versus the other vehicle that has a fraction of the lifespan, but it occupies the entire propulsion system of the vehicle. Feels problematic.
That could be tens of thousands of dollars that you have to earn back, $5 a gallon at a time, if you will. So I'm not saying that buying an EV should be put off forever, because these arguments will never go away. On the other hand, I do like taking my time to wait for the points that I just mentioned to help offset these two conundrums.
Yeah.
Now here's a tech concern that has me on the sidelines a little bit. Solid-state batteries. They are said to be arriving in 3, maybe 5 years at scale in production cars. Now, that's a bit of a bet because they're not imminent yet. But when they do, they are promising as much as a 40% reduction in carbon footprint. They are promising to give you a better, faster charge, 80% in 15 minutes in many cases, and also allowing cars to use a smaller battery to get current range, which is usually ample, meaning the car can continue to work on being lighter as well as being less expensive. I don't think this is going to be a huge hang-up for most buyers. It's a little bit of a perspective bet.
Well, yeah, waiting for the latest tech isn't a good argument, in my opinion. No, I totally agree on that front. I get where you're coming from on that because, yeah, if you're waiting for the latest tech, you're always going to be waiting for the latest tech. At some point, if you're truly committed to doing something, you will have to do it. Whether you're totally feeling like that's it, or, yeah, no, you just reiterated my point, yes. So yeah, I totally agree on that front. No, the thing to consider is just looking for where those trends, like he said, what I liked what he said was where he said it'll settle, where, yeah, you're going to have that moment of like convulsive, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And then it's going to find a stride. Like, okay, now the manufacturers have kind of figured out there's a momentum to this. They're all kind of going this direction. It's the old, VHS versus beta, HD DVD versus Blu-ray kind of thing, and then eventually you wind up with the Victor. But in this case, it's car manufacturers determining what technology gets what focus. Alex, before hosting an airport drag race, we asked our fire department if they can handle electric vehicles fire in case of a rollover, crash, etc. Anything can happen. He just chuckled and said, "Kind of gotta let it go. Hard to beat it." Oh boy. Yeah, just gotta let it go. I've seen those big blankets that they've talked about using, but how effective they are, I don't know. I haven't seen one of those actually in action. Normally, if David Cervantes was in the group here, he could probably tell you as a firefighter how that stuff looks, but I know he was talking before kind of how they handle that. And I think the blankets were among the things mentioned, or some different chemicals they use when dealing with that kind of fire.
But then again, you also don't want to be the last person who bought a laptop with nickel metal hydrides.
That's fair.
The new rules for...
Now, this is a big one when it comes to the U.S. tax incentives. If you're buying a new vehicle, especially an EV, something like that, it's good to pay attention to what kind of incentives, benefits you can take advantage of. But because of the way this stuff's been written, the scope has been narrowed quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to... Yeah, see, I'm really good at pausing on unflattering faces on people. Thank you for pointing it out, Alex. Anyway, I'll just let him explain, because he's probably going to say exactly what I was going to say anyway.
Federal incentives got broader and tighter at the same time.
Yeah.
See my piece explaining all the details, but the bottom line is most watchers have analyzed it and say something like 70% of EVs will not qualify for the next year or two for a federal tax incentive, or at least a full incentive, based on where their materials came from, or where they were assembled, or what their sticker price is. There's a whole lot of new hurdles the car has to jump
some states
to get the
offer
full
incentives on top of the
federal credit. The good news is there's now also a $4,000 used EV credit, but again, it's a more...
Okay, now that's nice. I hadn't heard about that one. But if they have a credit for used EVs, that's pretty cool, actually, because I don't remember them doing anything like that before. I know some people get a little, get their hackles up about, federal incentives and that kind of stuff, but, it's nice to know that it's actually there. And 4,000 is not a small amount for a used EV. I wonder what the qualifications are. Got this weird urge to build an EV with AliExpress parts. Dude, you're just going to build an EV the way some people will build like a shoddy gaming PC. Like, it'll do the job, but you might die getting there.
A complicated minefield to qualify for. I want to see more models hit the market that hit all the marks to get the full tax credit.
I'm sure the vehicle first.
Here's a simple one. I drive a lot less since COVID, and I always will at this point. Things have changed. That means
dude drives a Panther platform, guys.
An electric car's benefits have far fewer miles upon which to act, upon which to pay
lowered,
off
too.
than
Had a
they
front
would
splitter
have
on it.
just 2 or so short years ago. Maybe that's the case for you as well. This one's kind of big and nebulous, but I don't like single points of failure. And as we are electrifying our society, for good reasons, that's what we're driving toward. I'm kind of uncomfortable with my car getting into that basket as well, along with so many systems in homes and everywhere else. I will never not have 1 or 2, or right now 4 combustion engine cars. I have too many driving styles, trip types, and vehicle types that I like having access to. An EV is going to fit in that portfolio, but it's not going to replace them.
That just reminded me, I need to take my garbage down the driveway.
Okay, at this point, I've made the heads of
holiday threw me
Teslarati
off.
and tree huggers and coal rollers all explode. But this is just what I think about, and I spend a lot of time looking at and thinking about vehicles. When I wonder, when will I buy an EV? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But maybe this will help give you a little additional information and perspective as you work through a bunch of issues. Many of these I'm sure you're thinking about, and maybe a few that you hadn't.
No, it's very helpful. Thank you, Brian. All right, Alex, Dane, you need that basket for your Jag for the bins. Yeah, right? I'll just hook it up to the rear bumper. Got myself the cans hanging suspended just slightly off the ground. Easy does it. Just like that. All right. All right. They're using a lot of truck puns here. Back the truck up, what the truck. Okay. I mean, these are low-hanging fruit. But sure, let's go for it. What are they going to say?
Video to introduce him to see what he's going to be talking about.
The most impressive thing our electric truck has done so far is actually work. We didn't need to release the brakes and roll it down a hill to make a fake video of our truck moving. It actually moved. I mean, hell, we even let a bunch of random people hop in it in front of a large crowd and drive the truck to prove that it actually worked and anybody could hop in and drive it. So a bunch of truck drivers and loggers up in Canada made an electric truck
I was
that
going to say,
actually
this guy
worked,
sounds real
and
Canadian
$1 billion
right now.
company faked
What do you
it.
say,
So I'd
Alex?
say that's probably our most impressive thing.
I don't disagree with him.
I don't disagree. It's Chase Barber. He's the founder and CEO over at Edison Motors. He's a very funny and smart guy. Some may even call him an engineer.
Wow.
What's up, Chase?
I wouldn't say engineer.
You wouldn't say engineer? Well, you work with some great engineers. You guys are building Carl, right? You're working with some engineers on that.
He's fought a beaver for sure.
A few engineers, but honestly, my advice for people working with engineers is figure out whether you need.
Oh, Dan, thank you. That little bit there just helps, redeem, in my eyes. Hey, there are people who actually like my sometimes questionable choices. I feel like at least if you're going to live a life, you can either have something that's going to be safe or interesting. And I like to pick interesting because safe, it's safe, but what is that all there is? Is that your entire life is just safe? No, a little danger, sure, but like interesting. Interesting gives you so much more to go off of. You get stories to tell. You get experiences that'll actually last with you, leave impressions. I will take interesting over safe. Emotive, yes. I like something that makes me think or feel something rather than just encasing me, as I always like to say, in an NPC mobile where I just anonymously go off to work and leading a very, very uninteresting life. I mean, sure, some people lead very interesting lives and their car doesn't have to define them. But for me, as someone who loves cars, I do feel like it's an important aspect of my life. So I do take the extra effort to find something that I feel is expressive of how I feel and what I like. So yeah, no, I happen to find the Jag that fortunately has about the best reliability record of any Jag. So the X150 generation XKR is absolutely the most reliable Jaguar you can get of the modern era, I would say. From everything I've read and seen on forums online, all that, I've got one of the ones that actually manages to stay relatively affordable even after it depreciates. It doesn't like run you bankrupt. He's what a beaver for sure. Just reminded me about Anthony and Levi being hard on Dane's Jag. I'm a huge fan of Jag styling. I'm a Team Dane. Thanks. And the wrap over stock black. Agreed. No, I love the wrap. The wrap is awesome. The nagging is a sign of jealousy, with Levi having driven 97,000 vehicles in his career. Jag probably made top 5. At least all Dane's cars have titles. Ooh. Hey, you said it, not me. Jeez. Ay. Man, knocking it out. You guys. No, that is like, Levi knows he's making a joke, but he's also kind of serious when he said, I've driven 40,000 cars. It's like, yes, you have, technically. If I drove, 40,000 cars and 30,000 of those I drove maybe a mile or less, have I really driven that many cars? Yes, on paper I have, but was it enough to truly experience to a point that I could realistically say I know what everything I need to know about that vehicle from having driven it? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could find out everything I need to know about a car within a mile. I just don't know about that. But he'll still use that point to his advantage in any argument to try and win. So don't put it past him. I can't vouch that. I have driven many vehicles, and most importantly to me, many different kinds of vehicles, like a wide array. It's not just a whole bunch of like, oh, I drove a Sentra, then I drove an Accord, then I drove a RAV4, then it's like, no, I've driven some weird shit. Like, I've driven things that actually require a whole different mindset when you hop in one to the other. And to Levi's credit, he has to a certain point. But I think, yeah, it's like Supercar Blondie saying she's driven all these cars. Oh, God, you want to watch this comment section go to hell? Just say Supercar Blondie in it, and the whole thing just explodes. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to see what this guy says.
Need an engineer first.
Okay. I love your
How do you
advice,
determine that?
Well, there's a lot of issues with the truck that, like, you're building the truck. A lot of good mechanics know how a truck works better than engineers would. Like, they work on it. Mechanics work on it. Mechanics fix it. A mechanic can probably design something better than an engineer can for serviceability. When it came to designing things in the cab where you wanted things, we didn't.
Engineers, I love you, but when it comes down to what you do, it's usually a case of like, here's the best way we can think to make this thing, when it's functioning in an ideal capacity, it will do everything we say it can do and more. It'll be fantastic. Ours is a very idealized but realistic take on like an idealized form. And, eventually money has to play a role in what gets designed and what things get cut and all that. But in an engineering sense, yes, they have an ideal version of like, well, if I design this thing, it'll solve that problem and then we'll be great. And what they don't see most of the time, I'm sure there are many engineers who do, but what the mechanics see is the real world results of all that design, because at some point it has to stop. And there are certain design choices that are made, either for cost measures or for some kind of performance aspect, that make it much harder to work on, or just they didn't consider how it was going to be worked on when the time comes. Like a service manual is just like, figure it out. That part, like mechanics, just they're a surly bunch because they put up with a lot of shit. They talk a lot of shit, but they put up with a lot of shit. So yeah, no, it's an interesting world between those two, but I can get his point in trying to differentiate a little. Engineers, car's gonna need an oil change. Better make him drop the subframe to do it instead of making the filter accessible. Yeah, fuck those mechanics. To which the mechanics respond, thanks engineers. Hope this doesn't catch you on your way out.
In the cab. because the truck
Put
drivers
that
who
thing on
operate
loose.
these trucks
Off you go.
told us where they wanted things instead of an engineer. So we cut out a lot of engineers in there for, you know, technical stuff, high voltage stuff, but
Now, we haven't gotten to a point where I'm actually like seeing the truck in action, but I'm assuming his diesel electric hybrid tech that he's supposedly helped create with the help of other mechanics and stuff is essentially something they retrofit into existing platforms like a big Peterbilt semi truck or something like that. Is that kind of what they're getting at, Yoshi?
for the actual truck mechanics whole things, mechanics do it.
Gotcha.
It makes 100% sense. I mean, the very, very, just very practical nature of it makes sense. But I would argue that a mechanic is a bit of an engineer anyway. But yeah, that's very.
I would think. Well, you know, your tagline is stealing ideas from Tesla, and Elon threw down the gauntlet yesterday by saying that the Cybertruck would float. Has this changed your design ideas about Carl at all?
I don't think our logging truck.
So is this like a bit? I mean, I get, so this guy's actually helped create this stuff, but like he's calling it Edison Motors, and it's very tongue-in-cheek, especially when he just straight up says, yeah, stealing Tesla's ideas. I have no dog in the fight. I could care less. I just want stuff to work. So if somebody comes out more successful than the other, by all means, have at it. But that's hilarious.
Will float.
I don't think it will either. By the way, I wanted to congratulate you. I want to give you a little cowbell here because I saw that you just completed your second round of funding. I believe it was like, what, $1.5 million? Is that US or Canadian?
Canadian. We raised just over 1.5.
Also, for people who spend way too much time on the internet, I have to ask, why does the guy on the left look so much like Keemstar? I do not like Keemstar at all, but this guy looks like him on the left here. And he kind of sounds like him too.
$500,000 million Canadian in about 6 days. So we're super stoked on that. It's going to let us build the first production truck. So we're taking it from just a concept truck, the one behind me that was really a proof of concept of the diesel electric, and it's letting us build the first
17 US dollars, 1.5
the truck is for sale.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Are they all called Carl, or is that one Carl and the next one's name is Theodore, et cetera, et cetera? Where did Carl come from?
This one is just called Carl because when we did our original crowdfunding, one of the investors, he invested for his dad, who was a truck driver. And unfortunately, his dad passed away, and I found out about this while I was talking with him. So in honor of the guy's dad, we named the production or this first proof of concept truck after him. So his dad's name was Carl,
That's
so
nice.
we called the truck Carl.
Well, that's a way better story than Nicola's. Nicola's Trey is called the Trey because Trey is short for Trevor Milton, who's on trial right now for fraud.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not nearly as cool.
No, that's a much better story than that.
It's a much better story.
It's a much better. So you mentioned this, Carl. Here, this is like the prototype. You've been building on it. Last time we caught up with you, you were getting to some of that testing and driving stage. Where are we at right now with Carl?
Yeah, it's running, driving, testing. So we've been putting it on a dyno, load testing. We've been doing all our bobtail testing. So we haven't put the load on yet, but that's coming here in the first few weeks. We wanted to get all the data first without the load, how the generator performs, how it charges the batteries.
Nice and weather sealed.
We did learn a few things. We need a little bit more coolant system in the batteries than we thought.
I was gonna say, are all these like huge cases along the side, is that where they're putting the batteries? Because that looks like the only place you could put them.
A little bit more coolant, so that's one of those things that we'll fix. It gets just a little bit hot when you're jamming that much power into it in such a short time. We'll fix that up, and then we'll get hauling some actual weight and some logs.
The fender design is certainly interesting.
Speaking of learning from that prototype, one of the things that we saw was you were answering a question online about the braking, and you learned something about the compressor. Can you tell us about that in terms of the braking system and the first one bolting out?
Yeah, the first one was a 24-volt compressor, and it was like $1,100. It was supposed to be this fancy do-everything compressor, and it...
Oh no, Yoshi, that's totally fine. His main form of media is TikTok, so it's a little harder for us since we like long-form videos. Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I didn't want to watch this whole thing for like 20 minutes, but I did want to kind of get a sense of what he was doing. So if that helps, I'll click on that.
All right, what's the fuel savings on a diesel electric truck going to be? What are the miles per gallon? That's a really good question, but it's also one of the hardest ones for me to answer. You see, if we were making a dry van,
I'll follow this
truck
guy
was
out
just
of
going to be
curiosity.
going down
though.
the interstate, pulling 80,000 pounds on flat ground. We could calculate it. We could tell you the miles per gallon, but that's not what we're making. We're making heavy haul vocational trucks. We're making logging trucks, gravel trucks, cement trucks, hydrovac trucks, service rigs, low bedding trucks. These really depend what you're doing. I don't know how to answer the mile per gallon question on a logging truck because the answer is it depends what your road looks like. So I'm going to answer it the best I can. I'm going to show you the data on the generator, the fuel consumption on the generator. I'm going to show you how long the truck can run off its batteries before you got to fire the generator, how long it takes to generate. That'll tell you the runtime. And then we'll just have to basically figure it out from there because the best way to do it is put the electric truck next to a...
Oh, Dan, I need to say goodnight. This has been really enjoyable, Dan. Great to meet everyone here. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate you coming by and watching along here, and hopefully you get a chance to see the stuff that I'm passionate about outside of, our normal day job where I talk about detailing, that kind of stuff. Obviously, I've come to be interested in that over time, but my passions for, film, video, all that stuff kind of lies elsewhere here, so glad you had a chance to kind of pop in and see what that was about. So hopefully I didn't bore you to death, but thank you so much for taking the time and watching for a little bit. Appreciate you. Anyway, have a great night. Great to hear you elaborate on your thoughts. No, thank you. I appreciate that, seriously. Well, you have a good night, and I'll keep watching this because I am very curious about what's going on here. I have no intent of ever becoming a trucker, but this is definitely something that does catch my interest. So Yoshi, thank you for sharing this.
To a diesel truck and see what the difference is. That's a little bit harder to do as we're just testing at bobtailing and we're working our way up to full loads, and I'll start showing you the difference between the two, but for now, here's just what the technical data says. So this is the motor we're going with. It's a C9 Caterpillar, which means it's a 9-liter diesel motor. This is what replaces the C15, which is what the normal truck would have. An equivalent 15-liter motor. So this puts out about 240 kilowatts, 250 kilowatts. We have 100 kilowatt hour batteries, which means it'll take about half an hour at 75% load to fully charge the truck batteries. And in an hour, it burns 48 liters of fuel. So therefore, in half an hour, it's burning 24 liters of fuel. So we learned in our truck, running around just kind of as a bobtail, we got about 3 hours out of a bobtail rig. And then we got to fire the generator up and build that power back up, which means that in 3 hours of driving, we use 24 liters of fuel, which means we burn 8 liters per hour driving around. However, when you put a trailer on, you lower your range. Maybe it's down to 2. And if you're pulling Super Bs, you'll probably need to fire up, you'll probably get an hour of runtime out of this engine before you got to fire it up, which means you're burning it every single hour. You're burning 24 liters per hour running your trains. So that kind of gives you a little bit different thing. But then you got to consider the regenerative braking too. On a logging truck, you're going up the hill empty and you're coming down loaded. That regenerative braking is going to recharge your logs, which means you may almost never have to fire the generator up, maybe just a little bit to get to the mill.
That's an excellent
full
point.
day, you might only run that generator for half an hour because your regen's coming in. See how that makes a bit of a difference there? On the right logging application, like on the West Coast, you might only burn 25, 50 liters a day in fuel instead of 500 liters. That's a huge savings.
Yeah,
on a
that's
highway
massive.
truck, your fuel savings might only be like 5%. On a logging truck, you could be up to 95%. So our fuel savings is somewhere between 5 to 100%. All right, what's the fuel savings on a diesel?
I mean, it kind of feels like a little bit of a middle finger to anybody who asks, but I totally get what he's saying here. It makes sense, and actually that's very interesting. So cool. Okay, I like this guy. I'll have to keep an eye on that because that is legitimately interesting. Thanks for sharing, Yoshi. What do we got here? Got that covered. Okay. Now it's time for a little bit of car porn. Sorry, I'm going to show you guys something that interests me. I saw this in person when I was at the Quail, the automotive event. Saw one of these driving around, and it was gorgeous. It immediately caught my eye. And well, I'll just hit play on the video. I shouldn't sit here explain it to you. I'll just let it do the talking.
Although rallying started as a sort of fringe activity for a bunch of guys in forests, by the 1980s it had catapulted to the forefront of the motorsport enthusiasts' consciousness. New for 1982, Group B was sensational and unhinged in nearly every way. Its brief but explosive tenure as the top tier of rallying lasted just 5 seasons, rivaling Formula One for popularity and searing itself as legend in the minds of gearheads decades on. One of those gearheads is Luca Betti. A professional rally driver in more modern times, Betti also turned to the past, collecting, racing, and ultimately restoring a number of the iconic Group B cars from Lancia.
That's a very expensive
In the course of
hobby.
doing so, he learned enough about them to create this, the Chimera Automobili Evo 37.
So damn cool.
The Evo 37 draws its inspiration and much more from one of the greatest rally cars of all time.
37, baby.
If you're not a rally fiend, however, you could be forgiven for not fully understanding what the Lancia 037 is. It is part of a legendary dynasty of world-beating Lancia rally cars spanning 4 different decades. When people say make Lancia great again, it's these cars that they're talking about.
And
The
some Stratos
037 was a
behind me
clean
in
sheet
case you
design
missed
intended
it.
specifically for the World Rally Championship, and was raced by some of the greatest drivers of all time.
What's your lead now, Walter? I think 3.5 minutes before Marco and 9 minutes before the stick.
So you must be very happy with such a comfortable lead.
Right. I am already calculating every stage I can be 1 minute slower than stick.
Like many great competition cars, the 037 is the result of a major rule change. Group B went into effect at the start of 1982, permanently changing the landscape of European and ultimately global motorsport. It included a significant relaxation of the rules, and the resulting era is widely agreed to be the wildest period of rallying ever.
Yeah, Group B
In the
was
beginning,
shit.
however, it was chaos.
Yeah, and then there's that.
The rulemaking body, FISA, announced in 1979 that a rule change was coming in a few years, but didn't explain exactly what the rules would be, leaving manufacturers in the dark about what they would need to build. Fiat Group's competition team, led by Sergio Limone and Cesare Fiorio, took the gamble anyway, starting the development of a new car to contest rallies for a set of rules that had not yet been written. While they didn't
Brave.
have the rules yet, they did have a bit of experience building rally cars. It began in the 1960s with the Flavia, and really got going with its little brother, the front-wheel drive V4-powered Fulvia, which was a dominant force in
Fulvias are
Italian,
super
European,
cool.
and world rally events from the mid-60s until the early.
Also, one of the very rare vehicles where somebody who sounds like they know nothing about cars because they go, "Oh, what car do you have? Oh, what's your car powered by? My car is powered by a V4." When they really mean an inline 4, but they always hear V6 and V8 or V12 or V10, so they're like, "Oh, 4, I have a V4." And it's like, well, no, you don't. Unless you have a Lancia Fulvia or a Saab Sonnet, you don't have a V4. But if you have a Fulvia or a Saab Sonnet, you do have a V4. Or if you have a flat 4, a boxer engine like in a Subaru, you basically have a V4 that's just been more flattened out.
70s. It was eventually outclassed by the rear-engined Renault Alpine A110.
That's another car that's on my bucket list. A Renault Alpine A110? Yes, please.
And Lancia responded by building an all-new dedicated rally car with a mid-mounted engine, the iconic Stratos.
Yeah, a lot of these are on my bucket list.
It was difficult to drive, but wildly successful. Its brilliant career cut somewhat short
And it
by
looked like
parent
a
company
friggin'
Fiat's desire
spaceship.
to rally with a car that more closely resembled something the masses could buy in order to help the sales
Yeah, the
of
masses
regular
were
cars.
buying that.
This meant the creation of the Fiat 131 Abarth, which was also immensely successful, winning the World Rally Championship 3 times. With the end of the 131's production run, Fiat Group were open to a new rally car, and so for the upcoming Group B, Limone's team eventually settled on the concept of the 037, the central tub of the Beta Monte Carlo, with completely new tubular subframes mounted to both front and rear bulkheads. This would allow all new suspension with geometry to suit competition use, and also saw the engine rotated from transverse to longitudinal to provide space for the long double wishbones ideal for the kind of suspension travel necessary for rallying. To reduce technical risk and shorten development time, the engine would be a supercharged version of the Fiat Group's excellent twin-cam inline-4 designed by Aurelio Lampredi, which was used in naturally aspirated form in the 131 Abarth and a great many other Fiat Group products thanks to its inherent brilliance. For the same reason, the car would be rear-wheel drive, not four-wheel drive. FISA's late announcement of the rules meant a compressed development schedule, and the target was to get something reliable out the door in time to be racing for the first
Something reliable. They're Italian, dude.
ever Group B races at the start of the 1982 season. Lancia managed to do this, and the car was promising, but its all-new gearbox gave some teething troubles that prevented the 037 from consistently delivering strong results in 1982.
And that's
1983 went considerably better, starting with Walter Röhrl's famous and improbable overall win at Monte Carlo in January.
And the third of his career. Lancia for the World Championship? Well, the Italian team is certainly looking very impressive.
The remainder of the season was similar, and by the end of the year, Lancia edged out Audi by a slim 2-point margin to win the manufacturer's championship.
He could yet
Any
still
wreck
go
and
on
you're
to win the World Drivers'
One of the
Championship.
secrets of the 037's success was that it wasn't diabolical to drive like the Stratos. Walter Röhrl said in his later years, "The car I loved most was the 037. It was the one that suited my style the most precise and sincere. You could go 110% because it was perfect. For this reason, with a two-wheel drive car, we managed to win the World Rally Championship against four-wheel drive cars."
That is
The
impressive.
037's sensational 1983 season assured its status as a legend, but the writing was on the wall. For 1984, Audi's Quattros became more reliable and well-rounded in the broad range of conditions encountered in rallies around the world, and it was clear that four-wheel drive would be the way for the future.
Hard to argue with the sound of the Audi 5 cylinders, though. Oof.
The successor of the 037, the Delta S4, used the same basic architecture but added four-wheel drive. It also added a turbocharger to the already supercharged engine, creating a twin-charged power unit with good oomph down low and plenty of top end as well. Where the 037s raced with about 300 horsepower, Delta S4s and other late Group B cars raced with 500 or 600 horsepower, creating monstrously fast cars that
Have a good
ultimately
night,
proved
Alex.
so dangerous
Thanks for stopping
that
by.
a series of serious and sometimes even lethal accidents saw the termination of Group B before the 1986 season was even finished. The legacy, though, is a series of sensational cars which are revered today, particularly so by Chimera Automobili. Chimera Motorsport began by campaigning race cars for its founder, professional rally driver Luca Betti, who competed for 15 years in Italian and European rally championships. Betti is also wildly enthusiastic about the 037 and the Delta S4, and Chimera gained considerable experience restoring and preparing these vintage rally launches, eventually developing an understanding of these cars so intimate that they had the unique expertise to create what became the Evo 37.
So now we get to the Evo 37. The thing I'm interested in. And can definitely not afford.
So what is the Evo 37? In essence, it is a fully modernized 037 that maintains the ethos of the original car but is produced to a much higher standard. It is made in the same way that the original 037 was. A Beta Monte Carlo center section receives new front and rear subframes with bespoke motorsport-grade suspension, brakes, wheels, and tires. The engine is a modernized version of the Lampredi twin-cam engine, displacing 2150 cc's, with significant participation by some of the original engineers and technicians who built the original 037s, effectively picking up where they left off in the 1980s. Chimera began with a 037 Group B engine, disassembled and 3D scanned it, and then recast the block and head and remanufactured the other internals, all in modern high-strength materials. Engine management is a modern, fully electronic system, and like the original 037, it uses a Volume X supercharger but adds the turbocharging of the Delta S4 on top of this. The supercharger electronically declutches at high RPM as it loses efficiency, eliminating the drag it generates just as the turbocharger takes over. Power is transmitted to the rear wheels only via a 6-speed transaxle made by Dana Graziano, and is the same unit that was used in the Audi R8 and Lamborghini Gallardo.
That's serious hardware.
Suspension is via Öhlins coilovers, brakes are by Brembo, and each mechanical system was comprehensively re-engineered to take advantage of the significant technical progress of the last 40 years. Perhaps one of the most striking differences between the Evo 37 and the original is how nicely finished it is. The original 037, even the homologated road car version, or Stradale, was a fairly crude device built with nearly single-minded focus on racing. The Chimera, on the other hand, is a piece of art with virtually endless configurability
in its own kind of
finishes,
brutal
not
way.
just of the wheels, paint, and upholstery, but even the chassis and suspension elements. The car has a standard of detailing and finish that will captivate the most jaded car enthusiast for hours before so much as even starting the engine.
Wheels are fascinating too.
Once that enthusiast starts the engine, however, it will be all over. Like almost every good Italian car, the engine of the Evo 37 dominates the experience, and even among the rarefied company of sensational Italian engines, this one stands out. It sounds like nothing else thanks to its combination of supercharger and turbocharger. The former produces an unearthly noise, something a bit like, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, mooing at low RPM, while the quintessential turbocharger noises are also extremely prominent, particularly when dipping in and out of the throttle. The noise is complex, always present, and always changing. Even for the most experienced car person, it is intoxicating to play with the powertrain just to hear the sounds that it makes.
Man, that's nice. Such a crazy combination of sounds happening.
The engine's primary purpose, however, is not to make noise, but to make power, and it does this with explosive overachievement. The engine has numerous maps, but produces something on the order of 500 horsepower, about like the Delta S4 race car, but does so on pump gas and with a level of tractability and refinement that makes this car viable as an admittedly very thrilling road car. This is more power than a Ferrari F40, and at 2,400 pounds, the Evo 37 weighs 400 or 500 pounds less, and 600 pounds less than a modern GT3, which has about the same power. The resulting performance is, well, batshit. A big part of this is the supercharger, which gives torque down low and thus incredible responsiveness, which coupled with the low weight of the car makes it accelerate with nearly incomprehensible force. Then the turbocharger joins the party and things get even more insane. The remainder of the Evo 37's dynamics are equally wild, yet also well thought out. It has a lively, responsive, and highly adjustable chassis that makes the car feel positively alive. It is more than a little bit knife-edged, having obviously been developed by and for someone who drives at a very high level and wants a sophisticated, if mildly terrifying, device to deliver on every request the driver makes, however perverse that request may be. In spite of the Evo 37's vaguely unhinged personality, it is beautifully resolved, giving incredible control and security to the driver talented enough to extract it. The entire car delivers a purity of experience that comes only from cars that have been developed by a small team of dedicated and highly competent driving enthusiasts. The fingerprints of the Chimera team are all over this car. It is a rolling representation of the personalities, values, and philosophies of the people who created it. The most magical part of the Evo 37 is how successfully it exists as both an old car and a new car at the same time. Every part of interacting with it gives the sole fizziness and thrill of an old car, yet it is so thoughtfully engineered using the best modern technology that its competence and sensation of mechanical ability blows away the fragile tentativeness that tends to come with driving old cars hard, especially Italian ones. The Evo 37 isn't for everyone. In fact, it's not for most people. It's too focused, too brutal, too wild, not to mention too expensive for the average driver. That's just as well since Chimera are only making 37 of them. But for the right enthusiast for whom their F40 isn't quite exciting enough, the Evo 37 is an intoxicating and totally incomparable hair-on-fire thrill ride that's also set your heart afire gorgeous.
Yowza. All right, well, on that note, I feel like now is a good time to go ahead and cool off this stream. I'm going to go ahead and call it a night, but I appreciate you guys who did hang around here, watch with me. Thank you so much. Sorry, I got a hiccup. There we go. All right, free of the hiccup. Anyway, I think I'll be doing some more streaming this weekend, planning on it. So I've got a number of other videos I'd like to check out, but I want to do it when there's a few more people around. So in the meantime, I figure this is a good place to call it a night. But I'll probably go play some games with the guys. We'll catch up on that. I haven't been streaming playing Call of Duty with the guys because it seemed like more people were more interested in when we were doing like Sea of Thieves and stuff like that. But I haven't seen as much of interest with us playing Call of Duty. And admittedly, I'm not very good at it. So, you know, if you're watching Call of Duty streams to see somebody suck at it, which I don't know why you'd be doing that, but then you probably get something from my streams. But I figured it's just not worth it. So anyway, that's all I'm saying about that. But if there were a change in tune, people decided they did want to catch it, well, maybe I'll do a few. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, I'll probably come back right here tomorrow evening. Plan on doing something similar to what I did today. And yeah, that's really it. So I hope y'all have had a wonderful evening, a wonderful Black Friday, and had a wonderful Thanksgiving, of course, with your family, your folks, whoever you're with. And if it's just you, just hanging out, that's cool. And Dane's Deflated Pool, you have a good night too. I appreciate you. And yeah, that's really it. So I'm just going to kick it over here. I'll turn off my mic. I'll call it a night. I'll see you guys later. Take care. Have a good one.
Under the ground, all I know is I can't face it right now. Guess I'll pop a couple aspirin, stocking up on all my vitamins, washing out the bitter taste in my mouth. Should I kiss Mary?